Thank you for the introduction, and thank you for inspiring introduction to Robot Companion. Paulo and I shared that vision many years ago. I follow him throughout this, and it's been great. So today, I'd like to thank Hagida-san for inviting me, and I would like to thank all the organization of JST for actually doing this. And I thought today I'll give you an idea of why I wanted to do one particular focus that is my little mini moonshot. It's self-configuring multi-modal e-skin, okay? So if we think about it, so I'm from the Technical University in Munich, and I crossed between robotics, and then I spent a lot of time at ATR. I got influenced by neuroscience, and then now I spend a lot of time doing neuroengineering, okay? Creating engineer that can actually talk about the brain, right? And this is one way of contributing to society. Okay, that's my group. We spend a lot of time trying to understand and create cognitive system. And this heavily rely on that they can have to be functional effectively in the real world, okay? So we do not so much virtual characters, but we do a lot of very hardcore robotics. And we go across multidiscipline, and which I very much appreciate the Moonshot, which you are cutting across all the discipline, which is, I really value that a lot. And I think many of us saw the value over the year of working with other disciplines. Okay, these are my platform. I do use a lot of robots and do create a lot of robots as well at the same time. Right? We use robot to validate our hypothesis, and we use robot to actually demonstrate some of the key concept or key idea that we have. And the philosophy behind my lab is that we do a lot of science, fundamental science, on the understanding, and in particular, the human science on understanding how the brain deal with the world, right? And at the same time, we are engineers. We like to create a lot of innovation and a lot of things that can be developed by learning from science, right? We always have this antagonizing discussion between scientists and engineers, okay? So what I say is that engineer can learn a lot from science, natural science. And also at the same time, I believe that engineer can feed back to fundamental science to actually demonstrate something that more deep and more fundamental. Of course, the ultimate goal, of course, to actually contribute back to society, right? Enhancing quality of life of people, right? What are we doing this for, and why are we doing it? Right? I think this is very important. So I have this philosophy got encapsulated into a book a few years ago. It's called Humanoid Robotic and Neuroscience, just Science, Engineering, and Society. So we capture some of the, a series of us capture some of these into one single volume book. Okay, so recently, we've been actually refining some of these fundamental ideas of how to, and what we were phrasing it as a neuroengineering challenge. How do you fuse engineering, such as robotic, with neuroscience, right? And then going back and forward. And I've been very lucky to work with some of the top neuroscientists, in particular in brain-machine interface. Right? How do you create better robotic system? How do you create better solution that nobody else have ever seen before? Right? So I think this is part of the Moonshot idea, which I appreciate very much. So I'm going to give you a short introduction to football. I don't know how popular Japan is with football. In Germany, football is everything. In Australia, sports is everything. So in 2014, Germany won the FIFA World Cup. Okay, Germany won against Argentina 1-0. Okay, and the deciding goal was very late. It was a very long game, 1 goal. Okay, so I'm just going to put that in there, and then we're going to talk about this at the end. Okay, so I start with this, and then I'll give you a taste of what we're going to do. Okay, so in about, I think 20 years ago now, okay, I started at ATR, and I was challenged, right, to create the ultimate humanoid robot, okay, and which I love, okay. So we created a humanoid robot not 20 years ago, more than 10 years ago. It took many years to do this. It is a 51 degree of freedom humanoid robot, right, and it's fully force controllable, which is unheard of back in those days. And I think it's still very few humanoid robots have this kind of capability, okay? And this was actually a JST project, okay? So what we were wanting to do is create a platform that can help us study how the brain function, right? Of course, we went to the extreme of how to create the best humanoid robot in the world, which I appreciate very much, all right? So we created this as a platform to actually study human actually, and this is what we ended up with. We ended up with a humanoid robot that is fully force controllable, interactive, and it controls every single joint as it was similar to the way you and I control every single joint on our body, right? And what we were modeling at that time was how do you understand balancing in human, right? So that was a scientific question we had. And what we were modeling was a vestibular system, okay? And the innovation came out of this was many. I think I ended up with 11 patents on this work. That was very, very, very productive at the time, okay? So, when I left Japan, which is sadly I left Japan, somebody asked me, what will you do first? And the first thing I could think of was skin, right? So I challenge all of you to think about robot today. How many robots today you can think of that you can give it a hug and it will sense you and then react to you? Right. The human body are dictated by information of the skin. You and I sitting on a chair tell us a lot about our posture and how we interact with the world. Right. In Japan, you don't shake hands, but in the Western culture, we shake hands. Right. So there's a lot of that. In Italy, we give hugs. Right. This is very, very important and very social, and it also gives you a lot of information about the world. And it is also a predictive mechanism for you to safeguard yourself against harm, right? Your skin gives you that information, right? So the challenge was about 10 years ago, I said, can I have skin? Because I built this beautiful humanoid robot, right? But the only thing it does not give me was a sense of touch everywhere, okay? So the big challenge, I look back in entire history of robotic, we talked about it, many of us talked about it, but nobody ever succeeded in creating a full skin for a humanoid robot, right? And fully interactive and fully autonomous. So I look back in biology, look at how the brain do this, and then we discover a lot of these key mechanisms, right? Some of these things like action potential threshold and then fire rate and all these information, right? We translate a lot of these information we learn from neuroscience, human science, and we translate those into innovation for technology development, right? So if you start thinking about it, right, I challenge you to think about it over dinner tonight, the number of applications that you can have with artificial skin. Entertainment is one, sports is another, healthcare is a massive amount, of course industrial automation, and then of course monitoring of surfaces. Okay, so I couldn't buy any skin about 10 years ago when I was looking for some, and since historically I couldn't find anything that I could use, so we built it. Right, we went away and said, okay, let's build something. Right, what we did was that built as close as possible at the functional level how all the different modality that we can sense. Right? We were looking at vibration, temperature, forces, proximity. We're looking at a lot of these things that you and I are intrinsically aware of for our touch. And this is what we come up with. Right? And these are very, very basic. We took one little circuit board, we put it onto the robot, and then we started controlling it. Right? And then we can do pre-touch. You can control a robot with a handkerchief. You can control a robot by blowing on it. And then you can have multi-touch control, contact control. The difficulty is not just one or two sensors. Right? On the human body, right, we have something like 5 million receptors, right, that we use to sense the world. Right? So it's an immense network of sensors. Right? And that become a massive engineering dilemma. Okay, so we ended up sitting down, thinking about how the brain deal with the information, right, and how we can actually engineer this. And some of the self-organization aspect is the key that we discover from neuroscience. Okay, so in the brain, I think. Some of you already know about this. There's a body schema and spatial representation in the brain. And one of the key things is the sensory cortex, the somatic sensory cortex. And then the other thing that is very fascinating is the somatosensory homunculus. Right? It tells you where you're making contact or where each of your sensor is on the brain. Right? And it's virtually impossible to manually calibrate every single sensor to map out where they are located. So we started reconstructing a form of automated homunculus. So we are looking at here just one or two sensors, and then we started 3D reconstructing the shape. The homunculus is basically giving you the location of every single sensor on your body. And this is a form of self-localization and self-reconstruction. And then the other thing is that we learn as a child how we deal with sensing and acting. So there's a lot of association. In control is sensory motor control, but we learn a body schema on how do you act based on your sensor. Right? And there's a very beautiful thing that we do is that we jiggle our body, right? We shake, and even when you're inside the fetus of your mama, you actually learning your homunculus and your sensory motor association. That's what we believe, right? And then you gradually learn this. And what we built was something called motor babbling. The robot jiggle, right, like a little baby, and then it start learning about how to associate the sensory motor pair. Right. So it started doing this, and then what we want to do is put it on any robot. Right? We can actually just put it on, and then it automatically snap, and then and then the skin is completely automized, configured. And then of course there's things like cell configuration or reorganization, right? During damages, in our skin. We damage our cell all the time, but we do not shut down. Whereas in most engineering skin, as soon as you cut one little bit, the whole thing shut down. And these are the similar principle that we use on our body. And we self-recover. We do self-recover. We do a lot of hammer testing, nail testing, and then we just smash it. The beautiful thing is that it's self-organized within 40 milliseconds. This is faster than the control loop. So you can do live swapping of cable, and it will reconfigure the whole thing. So we did a 24/7 test. Okay, this is going a little bit extreme into the engineering, right? But all the inspiration did come from biology. Okay. So many applications. Right? I just want to touch on a few of these before we wrap up. One of the things is this humanoid robot is at the AIST. It is a position control robot. It does not know any sense of reaction. And this is my PhD student putting his life in danger for his PhD. So you can actually get into it and it will not squash you. Right? The awareness of robots based on proximity is a very important thing. I think what Paula was just talking about, robot companion. If we're going to have our companion next to us, it should be aware of us. And the skin is one of the key. Right? And this is just one example of that. Okay? And this is now turning industrial robot, right, transforming them, right? Any robot. So what our target was, well, my target was that we can transform any robot to a safe and compliant robot, right, just by putting skin on it. And without so much configuration. Automatically, you just put the skin on, right, and the robot completely configure itself, right, and function as a compliant robot. Okay. So that was the little moonshot we did, and you can control it with a feather. Okay. So that means you can actually transform an industrial robot to something completely safe. Right. We actually invite children into the lab and we give them a feather and they control a complete industrial robot arm. Okay. So now, remember what I was saying, that there's 5 million receptors on our body. Right? How do we deal with all that information? How do we deal with all the energy? Right, computation. Right. So the standard engineering principle is that you ask every single sensor to give me your data. Right. Can you imagine our brains sitting there and asking all the sensors 5 million times to give you the data? It just is an impossible task. Right. And then so what we did was just look at the brain, how the brain deal with this. Right. And this is an illustration of this. So if you have a human body, right, and then you have up to 5 million receptors, right, and then if you try to equivalent the same similar surface, right, what we estimated we will take more computing power than the entire room, right, and we don't get another brain, or we don't get 10 more brain to process the skin on our body, right, but the skin is very, very smart, or the human body is very, very smart. It does not send information unless it is necessary, right? That's the way we channel the whole thing in this way. That means that you can use the same principle, right? I think we were talking about teleoperation of CAs, right? Because if you think about 5 million instead of information getting sent over the internet, that would be impossible, right? So this is a similar principle as how the brain would deal with it, and you can apply this similar principle. Okay, so this is how we actually ended up with. It may be trivial. There is actually not a single humanoid robot in the world that is covered with artificial skin. And we take it for granted because we thought that's trivial because you and I have it. Right? Even just having skin on the feet has not been done. It surprised me when I looked at this. Right? And you can see how many applications we can have. We can fully interact with it. Right? And on the bottom one, you can see a full hug. And the robot is actually responding correspondingly. And then we went to extreme. I had a postdoc from Japan. He said, let's do box step dancing. Right, and then you need the full interaction when you're doing full face-to-face dancing. Okay, so okay, now I'm gonna I'll show you part of the reason why I wanted to go with skin and how I did, and then now I'm gonna go back to the soccer game. Okay, so soccer was great. World Cup was good. Unfortunately, we are not all super athletes. Recently, I spent the last about 5-6 years working with patients, or more than that, much more than that, about 10 years working with patients. MS, these are devastating diseases. And what we saw the other day in Tokyo was AOS, and they are also equally, they're paralyzing diseases. And the number is phenomenal. It saddens me, but I think, we as a society or a community can do a lot to help. Okay, so while I was in Japan, this was released in about 2008 inside one of the JST projects. I was challenged about 2016 or something like that. Somebody walked into my office. He said to me, I have a brain in the US, North Carolina, right, that we want to decode the walking pattern of the brain, okay? And the challenge was, can I control your humanoid robot in Kyoto, okay? Right, East Coast to Kyoto, right? So I spent many nights dealing with the time zone. I start work at midnight, right? And we started trying to connect the brain, right? And then get the humanoid robot to walk, okay? And one of the key mechanisms, you cannot just purely send trajectory over to the internet, right? I shortened all the delay, everything, right? And the other thing was that providing the feedback to the brain, right? So what we did was get the monkey to walk, decode the brain trajectory, and send that to the humanoid robot to walk, and then send the feedback of the visual walking pattern to the monkey. Right? Over time, we were very surprised. The monkey started controlling the humanoid robot, okay? And the interesting part here was that when you switch off the treadmill for the monkey, the brain start taking over, okay? Sending trajectory by observing the leg of the humanoid. So this was very interesting. It was very promising. It's very hard to do these pilot study. It took me, I think, a year and a bit more than that. Okay, so we started another little Moonshot project. We call it Walk Again project. Right? Michelangelo is a pioneer in brain-machine interface. Okay, so we started doing this, and then he set up a lab in Brazil, and then we started this project, and then we liberated 156 people to help us across 27 countries, 5 continents, to help us actually we have medical doctors, physicians, we have physiotherapists, they were wonderful, engineers, neuroscientists. And my task was actually get an exoskeleton working. We started building a full body exoskeleton in 2013. And I was traveling to Brazil every 2 weeks from November 2013. And the skin was a very critical part. We incorporated the skin inside the exoskeleton as well as on the feet to actually allow us to determine the state of the patient and also the state of the world. And the cell configuration helped a lot, and this is just a demonstration of that. Okay, so what we did was we worked with a lot of physiotherapists and a lot of neuroscientists and doctors. What we did was started training the patient. We end up with 8 spinal cord injured patients. They're all injured it's up to about C7, I think, in the spinal cord. So they're all paralyzed from probably chest down. Cannot sense, cannot move, right? And the paradigm was that we trained them using virtual reality, right, to train them to think about walking. They think walking, the avatar walk, right? And then the avatar, they think stop, the avatar stop. And then they think kick, the avatar kick, right? And then we use this paradigm to actually work out the decoding of the brain, right? And then we put them inside the exoskeleton, right? So this is what we were doing for about, I don't know, November. So the surprising thing was the brain adapted very quickly, right? Within about 2.5 months, quite a few of the patients could actually control the exoskeleton very nicely. Okay, so remember World Cup. Okay, so what we were doing was travel to Brazil every 2 weeks. And what we were offered to us was actually do the initial kick-off for the entire FIFA World Cup. Right, so June 12th, 2014, so we did the kick-off for the FIFA World Cup. This is a 29-year-old gentleman, Julia Pinto. He was the fastest to actually get a motor imagery signal to do walk, kick, and stop. He was the fastest, and he did really well. So we did the kickoff for the World Cup, so that was very nice. It was a first public demonstration, integration of neuroscience, medicine, and across all the disciplines. And I don't think... Okay, what was surprising for us was that we continued the training over about 13 months, right? And then what we did was do a lot of actually patient trial. Most of these patients come every 2-3 weeks, right? What is really surprising for us was that they start voluntarily controlling their own leg without the exoskeleton. Okay, so it was showing signs of recovery. They were all showing signs of recovery. So that was very interesting for us. This lady was, I think, she had lesion for about 12 years, and T11, it's not too high, but she could still recover, show signs of recovery. So that was very, very promising. We ended up with a Nature Scientific report on this work. Right. So this fusion between neuroscience, engineering, and all the other disciplines do provide some promises. Right. So I'm glad that I'm going to end up with this phrase. I just remember this particular meeting I had with the president a few years ago. He invited about 130 scientists to Paris to talk about AI. Okay, and then what the conclusion and the last remark that he made was that we should not forget AI. It should be an ethical AI. So don't forget that what we do has a very strong ethical consequence. And I think Paolo sums it up very well as well, and also Nori, and then some of the other people. So I want to end there. Thank you very much. I hope I didn't take up too much time. Thank you.